YouTubers, and welcome to another episode of the vlogs. Today, we've started the vlog with a delicious smoothie of rice. No, I'm just kidding. This is second breakfast. Had my first breakfast of a lovely delicious smoothie, but unfortunately the fruit and veg is running low, so we might have to venture to the shops. But not today. We've got maybe 2 or 3 days worth of food before we really have to go outside the house. And it's kind of strange to be talking about that situation, because that's kind of where we are right now. Just kind of don't want to go out the house too often, or far out the house too often. Just want to minimize the impact we have on other people, and the same thing other people have on us. But today, Zoe and I tried a little bit of a sort of stretching routine the other day, and I was like, oh well, I've done yoga before, I'm reasonably flexible, this should be fine. And then we did some of the flexibility routine, and it was heinous, absolutely rubbish. And so we're bringing that into the vlogs of increasing flexibility during these times of isolation. Again, similar to the core workout that I made yesterday, this kind of stretching can be done anywhere, anytime, as long as you've got a little bit of time and a little bit of space. So today we're going to fuel up on second breakfast, but after that we also have a lovely erg to do, which it seems, as always at this current time, is a 90-minute on the ergo. And I've said this before, but I'm almost more excited to be watching whatever I'm watching on the erg rather than do the erg itself. So that kind of is another layer of motivation for me. It's like, oh well, say you're watching a series, you're like, well, oh, I've just finished at 90 minutes and it ended on a cliffhanger. So you're like, okay, well, this next episode is going to be a banger, so I want to get on the erg to watch whatever it is. And that's kind of what I've done. I've been like, well, I don't really watch YouTube a lot, I don't really watch Netflix a lot, but when I'm on the erg, I can just go to town with whatever I'm watching. So it's, if I can manage to allow myself not to watch those things outside of the erg, again, another layer of motivation that maybe the Yamsquad can use to get themselves a little bit more motivated to hop on the rowing machine. But like I said, time to fuel up, and then we'll see about those stretches. Oh yeah! Yam. And we've finished fueling up. Yam's taking a little bit of a food nap, and it's time to do some stretching for me. So I've been basically doing some stretching and really realized that I'm not as flexible as at least I once was, or at least I thought I was. So there's a couple of points or a couple of areas where I want to work on my flexibility, and I'll tell you why just as I put the camera down. There we go. So why would I or someone want to work on their flexibility? Well, there's multiple benefits to being a bit more flexible. I'm not saying go out and try and do the splits or try and go and do some sort of crazy pretzel type movements, just to improve your flexibility to do a couple of things. So for one, if your body or muscles are very, very tight in a certain area, then you can actually end up losing power or losing the ability to generate more power in that area, which in sport is very, very important, especially in rowing. So my hips, my back, my ankles, my arms, my shoulders have to be flexible enough, pretty much my whole body in rowing, to be able to generate and transfer power to the rowing blade when on the water, or the rowing machine when on the rowing machine. And so there's 3 areas where I have found just over the last few days I'm incredibly not flexible. So number 1 is my wrists, and I'll show you sort of some things I've been doing to help improve the flexibility of the wrists, as well as sort of taking today as a benchmark for my flexibility in these areas. And then I'll probably make a video later once I feel like I'm more flexible, to see how long it'll take me to make those differences. So I've got my wrists. That's one place where I want to increase my flexibility, partly because I've been having a little bit of an issue with this left wrist. And if you can see here, I'm pretty inflexible as it is, but you can almost get to 90 degrees, but then you take this arm and it's struggling to get to 90, maybe 80 at a push. And so that's just a really simple way for me to be like, well, if I can sort of get both hands together and both at 90 degrees, so you can see this arm down here is coming down, but this arm's able to stay straight. If I can do this and both arms are 90 degrees with hands touching, that'll be an improvement for me. But when I'm sculling, obviously I'll be doing don't want to be revving the blades, but I will need control, stability and power from my wrist as I go forward into sculling. And one of the reasons why I can't really feel this difference in my right hand versus my left is because in sweep, when you've got one oar in rowing, you do most of the movement with your outside hand, the movement of the wrist or the fingers or the hands, and whereas the left hand, or at least on my side, on bow side, on starboard side, you do barely any movement with the inside or left hand, and you let the right hand move the blade itself. So it kind of loosens and it doesn't actually move, whereas the right hand or the outside hand for me does the movement. So it's used to kind of moving around, and hence my left is getting a bit more battered by the new movement, or it was when we were on the water back a few weeks ago. So number 2, this is more of one, a sort of a general one, pretty much all rowers are really sort of look at, or I really recommend looking at, is your hips. So for me, squatting is a big thing in the gym, and my hips restrict me. And the third area I want to focus on also restricts my squatting ability, but my hips not only restrict my squatting ability, but also are very, very important, like I said, to generate power in the rowing stroke. So if I get a bit more flexible with my hips, I can then improve my ability to compress, not too much mind you, but compress a bit more easily, therefore spending less energy to compress, and therefore more energy to the opposite of compress and push. So that is one thing. And to sort of judge how I am flexible with my hips, it actually pretty much ties into the same exercise that I'll be looking at for the third area, and that's my ankles. My ankles themselves are very inflexible, and again they tie into my ability to squat. Not necessarily, I can get to sort of parallel, but it's going below parallel is pretty difficult for me, especially when I'm not wearing weight shoes or I've got my heels lifted. So increasing my flexibility in my ankles as well as my hips should both tie in together, meaning I should improve my squatting ability, which should then tie into increased power or strength gains. But then also tying into rowing, it should mean I can push better when I'm on the machine or on the water, because if you have your foot planted on the foot plate fully, you have more of a contact point, you have more surface area and more to push off of. If you're up on your toes, yes, you have sort of that springy, powerful load, but also you will come down to your heels flat anyway, so it's a little bit of lag there where you can really push, but that's a whole nother video about heels down versus heels up. I'm just kind of talking about trying to get my ankles flexible. So there's one sort of movement I did the other day while stretching with Zoe that really highlighted my inflexibility in my hips as well as my ankles. And so I'll just put the camera back and see if you can see this. So basically it's a nice simple thing to check my flexibility. You want to do a little bit of a lunge, which is fine, and obviously this can be stretching in here, which it does, and I'm obviously not very low. But the exercise that we wanted to do was just in here. So that really stretches me here, but my ankle, I'm not sure if you can see, I think that's a bit better, but as you can see here, my ankle is not anywhere, or my heel is not anywhere near the ground. So for me to keep my foot on the ground, oh, that's really have to force it in there, as well as being tight in here. And ooh, that is quite a big movement for me, especially on the ankle. So I will be trying to improve on that as time goes forward. The aim is to get all three sort of movements a bit better, or all two movements a bit better, all three areas a bit better. So movement 1, basically what we'll do is, so it's about 70 degrees there, maybe 80. And then here I've got about 90, and I want that to improve and this to improve drastically. And with my ankles and my hips, trying to improve them. Basically, hopefully, getting into that same position with my heel down, but with much more comfort and not feeling a huge stretch. But how am I going to do that? How am I going to improve my flexibility? Well, there's many ways to do that. You can do the very basic, just stretching. Stretch those areas. So for here, I can just hold that stretch, hold that stretch, hold that stretch, and it's very simple. You can do some resistive stretching using bands or someone else, or you can do sort of the stretching where you push against. So I'm pushing against my right hand with the left hand, and then relax, and then push against, and then relax. That's another type of stretching, but you can do that anywhere else. And there's other things you can do to make it a bit more interesting and a bit more second nature to improve that flexibility. So since my hips and my ankles are pretty inflexible, things like taking away chairs forever, or at least for the time being, kind of help improve your flexibility. So right now I'm sitting down with my legs out here, either side of the camera, and it's currently stretching my hips, rather than I could sit on a chair and end up with my hips just being at a 90-90 angle and either getting tighter or just not really doing anything. So using the time that you're spending anyway to get loose. So for example, no chairs at dinner time. You grab your dinner, not necessarily eating on the floor, but maybe you have a low table, put your food there, and then you have to sit cross-legged, or you have to sit with your legs in a position low enough that you end up probably stretching those areas, or at least for me, my hips anyway. And ankle-wise, trying to force myself into that position. So for me, pushing into that squat position where it is quite uncomfortable, so standing by a wall and just trying to squat. It's just trying to get as low as possible, but using the wall as, or the door handle or something as an anchor, so you can get into that position without falling over. And then over time, loosening the pressure on the wall or the anchor as you get more flexible, but really trying to almost force it. So it depends on the area that you're not very flexible in, whether it's bones, tendons, muscles, or anything like that. But also, as always, Yamsquad, I'm not a professional in this field. I've just got a bit of experience in it. So if you did feel like you're very inflexible in one area, then maybe you could speak to a physiotherapist, a doctor, maybe even your coach or whoever it is, to see what could work best for you. Because just because an area might feel tight doesn't mean it has to be loose, but also maybe there's an underlying reason why it feels tight, and it might be something else to look at rather than just loosening it off. And then there's a whole conversation about being too flexible versus being too not flexible, if that makes sense. And and that kind of ties into different sports as well. But I'm going to continue sitting on the floor, stretching my hips, and then we're going to hop onto the erg, and maybe Yam will wake up from his food coma and we get to go play with Yam. Is that right, Yam? What do you think? Would you agree? Yam? Yeah, what's this? Maybe not. Let's hop on the erg. Yeah. And we've made it into the Yam Cave. I've got my favourite cheerleader here to cheer me on during this workout on the rowing machine, because remember, erg is bait and offers a superb workout. So today is nice and steady, 90 minutes, and hopefully it'll lead to better scores on this machine right here. But I was also just thinking, after a little bit of stretching, during some stretching, why don't we do a sort of challenge, at least for myself, and if you wanted to follow along, then so be it. It'll be a 4-week challenge. So for me, it's going to be taking those places from, so wrist angles, ankle angles, and hip feelings. And is there something that you want to improve on over the next 4 weeks, using the time we have in isolation to work on ourselves, whether that is your calligraphy, whether that is your piano, whether that is eating better, or whatever it is, maybe taking the next 4 weeks to work on yourself. So for me, increasing my strength as Yam goes to town on a bone. Is that a good boy? So maybe his is a 4-week bone challenge. But that will be sort of my challenge in the next 4 weeks, to see how not necessarily how flexible I can get, but how much of an improvement will I, one, feel from being flexible, and two, how much of an improvement could I actually get? So can I get a couple of degrees on the wrists, maybe more than a couple of degrees on the ankles? I don't know, we'll soon find out. But now, I'll let the video play out with a lovely time lapse of the erg today. Oh, yeah.